The fake security guard's hand cracked across my wife's face while I watched from our kitchen window. I'm making Sarah a surprise lunch. Just got back early from training when I see this rent-a-cop screaming at her in our driveway. She's balancing grocery bags trying to stay calm, the smell of spilled milk already hitting the hot Texas asphalt. Then it happens. Crack. He slaps my pediatric nurse wife across the face. Sarah stumbles, groceries exploding everywhere. This psychopath stomps on our eggs like he's crushing dreams, adjusts his fake badge, and smirks. Next time, follow HOA rules, lady. Here's what he didn't know. That training I just got back from, advanced combat techniques, the kind they don't teach mall security guards. What would you do if some wannabe cop assaulted your spouse? Drop a comment from wherever you're watching. I bet half of you have HOA horror stories too, because this fake cop was about to learn why you don't mess with military families. Let me back up and tell you how we got here. I'm Commander Jake Steele, 15 years active duty Navy SEAL, recently transitioned to reserves. The kind of training where you learn to neutralize threats in 12 different ways before most people finish their morning coffee. My wife Sarah is a pediatric nurse at San Antonio Children's Hospital, believes in solving problems with kindness instead of force. Opposites attract, right? Our kids, Emma and Marcus, are 12 and 9 straight A students who think Dad's job involves a lot of swimming and camping. If only they knew. 6 months ago, we bought our dream house in Oakwood Estates. 200 homes of suburban perfection outside San Antonio, where the smell of fresh mulch hits you every morning and automatic sprinklers sound like tiny machine guns at dawn. Every lawn regulation height, every driveway spotless, every resident paying $350 monthly to maintain this slice of American paradise. Most neighbors seemed normal. The Chens next door brought us homemade dumplings. Their garden smells like heaven when Mrs. Chen's cooking. The Rodriguez family, 3 houses down, waves from their perfectly painted porch. The kind of place where kids' laughter echoes between houses and Friday night barbecues make the whole street smell like mesquite smoke. Then we met our very own neighborhood dictator, Brenda Hartwell. Picture every Karen stereotype weaponized and given legal authority. 52 years old, bleached bob haircut, sharp enough to cut glass, permanently dressed in designer workout clothes, despite the only exercise being jumping to conclusions. She drives a white BMW SUV with vanity plates reading HOAPRES because subtlety died with her last marriage. Brenda's our HOA president, treats the position like she's running her own little dictatorship. Also a real estate agent, the type who'll smile while foreclosing on your grandmother. Recently divorced, bitter about losing half her assets and making everyone else pay for her personal drama. Week 2 in paradise. I come home from base to find a violation notice zip-tied to our mailbox like a scarlet letter. The crime? Flying a small American flag in our front yard. Apparently, Old Glory violated the unapproved holiday decoration policy. Fine, $150. Remove in 48 hours or face daily penalties that would make loan sharks blush. Sarah called Brenda to discuss it politely, got a lecture about maintaining community standards. Brenda's exact words, dripping with condescension. Military families sometimes struggle adapting to civilian community expectations. Here's a fun fact. I've adapted to enemy territory in 4 different countries, but apparently suburban Texas was my Waterloo. I took the high road, temporarily removed the flag, figured I'd change the system from within. Sarah kept believing maybe Brenda was just misunderstood, maybe we could find common ground. That optimism lasted until Brenda unleashed her secret weapon. Meet Derek Hartwell, 28 years old, Brenda's unemployed nephew, and our new security contractor. Derek's what happens when delusions of grandeur meet complete incompetence. Failed police academy twice. Psychological evaluation cited temperament unsuitable for law enforcement. Translation: too stupid to be a real cop. He drives around in a white pickup with magnetic security signs that probably came from a cereal box. Wears a surplus security uniform that fools absolutely nobody with functioning brain cells. The crunch of gravel under his tires became our neighborhood's most annoying soundtrack. Week 4 brought our next charming encounter. I'm washing my F-150, with veteran plates and 0 commercial markings when Derek rolls up like he's busting Al Capone. Commercial vehicle violation, he announces, spitting tobacco juice into a Mountain Dew bottle. The sound makes me want to introduce him to some advanced dental work. Fines $200. I show him registration, point out veteran plates, explain basic vehicle classifications. Derek just shrugs. My measurement's what counts, pal. The smell of his cheap cologne mixed with tobacco spit could weaponize nausea. This clown couldn't intimidate a sleeping puppy, but he had Brenda's backing and a neighborhood too polite to call out obvious fraud. Sarah tried reasoning with him, got more aggressive posturing. Maybe your husband needs to understand military don't make rules here. That night, researching Texas HOA law until 2 a.m., I found some very interesting legal loopholes, but I still believed in diplomacy over demolition. Big mistake. Brenda and Derek were just warming up. Week 6 brought Derek's masterpiece of stupidity, a citation for grass height exceeding community standards. I'm reading this thing over my morning coffee, the good stuff that tastes like victory instead of base mess hall sludge, when I see the fine, $200 with daily $50 penalties until corrected. Problem is, I'd measured my grass the day before at exactly 3.25 inches. The HOA limit? 3.5 inches. So either my ruler's broken, or Derek flunked basic mathematics along with everything else. I walk outside to remeasure, and sure enough, 3.25 inches, well within regulation. The morning dew makes the grass smell fresh and clean, nothing like the stench of Derek's fraudulent citation. When I call Derek to discuss his measurement error, his response is pure poetry. My measurement's what counts, pal. Maybe your wife needs to understand the rules better. The implied threat in his voice made my jaw clench. In Fallujah, guys who threatened families got introduced to advanced conflict resolution techniques. But this wasn't a war zone. This was suburbia, where problems get solved with paperwork instead of precision strikes. That evening, I hit the books like I was planning a mission briefing. Years of military legal training taught me something valuable. Bureaucrats always leave paper trails, and paper trails reveal weaknesses. I dug through Texas property code until my eyes burned and found exactly what I needed. Turns out Derek's citation violated 3 separate requirements. No specific measurements listed, no licensed inspector signature, no compliance with their own procedures. I remembered my JAG buddy telling me once, always demand documentation. Most fake authority figures can't produce legitimate paperwork. Smart man. This was about to prove very useful, so I file a formal complaint with the HOA board demanding Derek's credentials and proper measurement documentation. Professional, by the book, completely legitimate. Brenda's response? Call an emergency board meeting for 2 p.m. on a Tuesday when every working resident can't attend. The meeting notice arrives 24 hours beforehand, barely legal under their own bylaws. It's like she learned governance from a dictator's handbook. Sarah volunteers to go since I'm stuck at base for mandatory training. My wife walks into that community center like Daniel entering the lion's den, armed with nothing but facts and good intentions. The fluorescent lights buzz like angry wasps while Brenda stacks the deck with her loyal followers. Nancy, divorced neighbor who thinks military families are too aggressive. Bob, retired accountant who rubber stamps everything Brenda wants. And 2 other residents who owe Brenda real estate favors. The smell of burnt coffee fills the room, probably been sitting there since the Clinton administration. Nancy's nervous pencil tapping sounds like a woodpecker having an anxiety attack. Sarah presents our case professionally. Derek's citation lacks required documentation. Measurements don't match reality. Enforcement procedures weren't followed. She requests Derek provide proper credentials and remeasure our lawn with witnesses present. Reasonable request, right? In a reasonable world, maybe. But here's where things took an interesting turn. Instead of addressing our legitimate concerns, Brenda pulled a move straight out of the tyrant playbook. The board has decided to increase enforcement standards to maintain property values. Derek now has full authority to issue immediate citations for any visual violations. Vote passes 3-1, Sarah's dissent ignored like a whisper in a hurricane. They literally changed the rules mid-game to protect their fake cops' fragile ego. I'd seen this tactic before in corrupt local governments overseas. When you can't win fairly, just change the rules. Derek celebrates by returning the next day with a laminated Enforcement Authority badge, probably made at Kinko's, between someone's business cards and missing cat posters and unleashing citation hell. Kids' bikes on the lawn? Fire hazard. $150 fine. Garden hose visible from street? Aesthetic violation. $150 fine. Welcome mat not perfectly centered? Community standards breach. $150 fine. Total damage in one afternoon. $450. At this rate, Derek could finance a small country's defense budget. Sarah discovers the neighborhood Facebook group has turned into a digital witch trial. Brenda's post. Some families don't understand community values and proper respect for authority. Nancy adds, military people think rules don't apply to them because they have guns. The keyboard warriors pile on, questioning everything from our parenting to our patriotism. Sarah responds with facts, and diplomacy gets accused of military wife attitude and playing the victim card. Meanwhile, I'm researching Derek's background like I'm building a target package. My intel training came in handy here. Always verify credentials before engaging any target. Turns out our security contractor has 0 licenses, 0 insurance, 0 legal authority whatsoever. His company doesn't exist in any state database. I call the Texas Private Security Board. They've never heard of Derek Hartwell or Titan Security Solutions. This confirmed what I suspected. Unlicensed security can't issue citations, carry restraints, or claim law enforcement authority. Derek was operating completely outside the law. But here's the beautiful part. Derek doesn't know I know this yet. I file complaints with the county sheriff and state attorney general, request all HOA financial records under Texas disclosure requirements. Time to see what other secrets our little dictator's been hiding. Brenda panics, tells Derek to handle the situation before it escalates further. Derek's interpretation of handle? Double down on harassment and intimidation. The sound of his truck engine became our daily 6 p.m. reminder that stupid has no limits. Emma starts asking why the mean spitting man drives by during dinner. Marcus wants to know if we're in trouble with the police. How do you explain to kids that some adults never learned basic decency? That sometimes good people have to fight back against petty tyrants who peaked in middle school? I was about to give Derek a masterclass in consequences. Derek's next brilliant strategy? Turn our family into his personal surveillance project. It started subtle. If you can call a white pickup truck with magnetic security signs subtle. Every evening at 6 p.m. sharp, Derek would cruise past our house like he's conducting the world's most obvious stakeout. Park across the street, engine idling, staring through our kitchen window while we're trying to eat dinner. The smell of his cigarette smoke drifted across the street, mixing with Sarah's homemade lasagna and turning family time into dinner theater nobody asked for. Then it escalated. Derek started following Sarah to the grocery store, sitting in the parking lot like some discount private investigator who learned surveillance from bad TV shows. She'd come out with bags of milk and bread, and there's Derek, watching her load groceries like she might be smuggling state secrets in the Cheerios. Sarah tried ignoring it at first. She's got that nurse mentality where you deal with difficult people by staying professional and hoping they'll eventually find a hobby that doesn't involve stalking. But Derek wasn't getting bored. He was getting bolder. The breaking point came when Derek approached our kids at the school bus stop. Emma and Marcus are walking to catch the 7:15 a.m. bus. You know, being normal kids who worry about math tests instead of neighborhood psychopaths when Derek rolls up in his wannabe cop car. Tell your parents their family's getting a reputation in the neighborhood, he says to my 12-year-old daughter. Maybe they should think about finding a community that's more suitable for their lifestyle. When Emma told me that story, something cold and lethal settled in my chest. The kind of feeling that used to precede very bad days for very bad people in very distant countries. You threaten me? Annoying but manageable. You threaten my wife? We've got serious problems. But you mess with my children? Now you've wandered into territory where my specialized skill set becomes extremely relevant. But Sarah convinced me to handle it legally first. Smart woman, she knows I've got other options if the civilized approach fails to produce results. So I installed security cameras around our property, completely legal in Texas. Suddenly Derek's harassment patterns became beautifully documented evidence. Every creepy drive-by, every stalking incident, every violation of basic human decency, all captured in courtroom-quality high-definition video. My intelligence training kicked in and I started building a real dossier on Derek. 2 DUIs, domestic violence arrests that mysteriously got dropped when his ex-girlfriend stopped cooperating, and those failed police academy psychological evaluations citing aggressive tendencies and poor impulse control. Basically, Derek was a textbook case of someone who should never have authority over a goldfish, let alone human beings. But here's where the investigation got interesting. Sarah befriended Bob's wife at the grocery store, you know Bob, the HOA treasurer who stamps approved on everything Brenda slides across his desk. Turns out Bob's wife is actually delightful when she's not watching her husband enable neighborhood fascism. Over coffee and casual gossip about community drama, Bob's wife casually mentions something fascinating. Derek's pulling down $3,000 monthly for his security services. $3,000 a month to harass families and cosplay as law enforcement. Now I've dealt with military budgets, and something smelled fishier than week-old sushi. I pulled the HOA financial records, public documents they legally can't hide, and found something beautiful. Derek's payments were coming from the Maintenance and Repairs Fund. No approved security contract anywhere in the official records. No board vote authorizing the expense. No legitimate paper trail whatsoever. My counterterrorism training included financial investigations, and this had all the hallmarks of a classic embezzlement scheme. Brenda was paying Derek under the table using community funds, essentially stealing from every family in the neighborhood to fund her personal goon squad. When I casually mentioned this discovery to Bob at a neighborhood barbecue, his face went whiter than his polo shirt. Poor guy had no idea Derek was receiving any payments, let alone $3,000 monthly. The board never voted on any security contract because no legitimate contract existed. Derek, meanwhile, was getting increasingly desperate. He realized my cameras were documenting every illegal thing he did, so he decided to intimidate me directly. Big mistake. He waited in our driveway one evening when I got home from base, blocking my truck like he's conducting some kind of official traffic stop. The crunch of gravel under his boots sounded like someone walking on their own grave. "I need to search your vehicle for contraband," Derek announces, chest puffed out like he's starring in his own action movie. I almost burst out laughing. This amateur thinks he can run cop games on someone who's dealt with actual terrorists in actual combat zones? "Show me your warrant, your badge number, and your supervisor's contact information," I replied with the kind of calm that comes from knowing exactly how many ways this could end badly for him. Derek starts fumbling like a freshman trying to explain missing homework, realizes he can't provide any legitimate credentials, finally admits he's a contractor for the HOA but insists he has the same authority as police officers. I decided to provide some free legal education. Contractors have zero law enforcement authority in Texas. They can observe and report, period. No searches, no detentions, no citations, no physical confrontations, no pretending to be someone important. Derek's face turns crimson, starts screaming about military people thinking they're special and not respecting civilian authority. The irony was poetry, a fake cop, lecturing a real military officer about legitimate authority. That's when the neighborhood dam burst. Mrs. Chen reported Derek demanding to inspect her garden for foreign plant violations. The Rodriguez family got citations for ethnic cooking odors that somehow violated community standards. Mrs. Patterson found Derek in her backyard claiming he needed to check her fence height at midnight. Sarah created a shared Google document tracking all harassment complaints. The timeline revealed systematic targeting of minorities and military families, exactly the kind of discrimination pattern that makes federal attorneys salivate. The legal net was tightening around Derek and Brenda like a well-planned tactical operation. They were about to discover why you never corner a predator with nothing left to lose. Derek's behavior spiraled into full-blown stalker territory faster than a fighter jet hitting afterburners. It started with the parking lot ambushes. Sarah would finish her shift at the children's hospital, 12 hours of saving kids' lives and dealing with worried parents, only to find Derek waiting by her car like some discount bounty hunter who learned intimidation from YouTube tutorials. He'd position himself between Sarah and her vehicle, arms crossed, claiming he needed to conduct security interviews about neighborhood violations. The first time it happened, Sarah tried being polite because that's who she is, someone who believes reasonable people can solve problems through conversation. "Derek, I'm tired and need to get home to my children." "This is official HOA business, ma'am. I need to discuss your family's ongoing violations." "What violations?" "Our grass was regulation height, our car was properly parked, and our kids' bikes were stored in the garage like good little suburbanites." But Derek would stand there, blocking her exit, forcing Sarah to listen to fabricated infractions while hospital parking lot security wondered why this obvious nutcase was harassing their best pediatric nurse. The psychological warfare escalated when I deployed for mandatory 2-week training. Derek somehow figured out my schedule, probably through Brenda's real estate network connections, and increased harassment the moment my truck disappeared from our driveway. It's like he had a Derek signal that activated whenever the scary military guy left town. Sarah started finding footprints under our bedroom window. My security cameras caught Derek creeping around our backyard at night with a flashlight, claiming later he was checking for fence violations after dark. The man was literally peeping into our house, using HOA enforcement as cover for behavior that would make actual police officers reach for their handcuffs. When Sarah called the non-emergency police line, the dispatcher's response made my blood pressure spike into combat zone levels. Sounds like a civil HOA matter, ma'am. You'll need to work it out through your community association. Civil matter? Some psychopath is prowling around my house at night while I'm serving my country, and local law enforcement treats it like a property line dispute? I made a mental note to have a very educational conversation with that police department when I got home. From 2,000 miles away, I coordinated a response using skills they don't teach in civilian management courses. My battle buddy Marcus, 6'4" Marine who makes Derek look like a malnourished teenager with authority issues, started doing random wellness checks on my family. Just happened to be in the neighborhood, visiting his old Navy friend's wife and kids. Funny how Derek's nighttime reconnaissance mission stopped immediately after Marcus introduced himself and casually mentioned his hobby of collecting examples of civilian harassment for military legal training purposes. But Derek found new ways to make Sarah's life miserable. He started showing up at the children's hospital, claiming official HOA business that required speaking with Mrs. Steele immediately. Hospital security had to escort him out twice before banning him from the premises entirely. The smell of desperation was getting stronger than Derek's discount cologne mixed with delusion. That's when Derek made his stupidest move yet, filing a false 911 report claiming domestic disturbance at our house. Police responded to find Sarah helping Emma with algebra homework while Marcus practiced piano, basically the most threatening domestic scene since Leave It to Beaver. Derek insisted he'd heard military-style yelling and sounds of combat training coming from our house. The responding officer, a veteran himself, took one look at our quiet suburban home and realized Derek was either completely delusional or pathologically dishonest. "Sir, I need to warn you about filing false emergency reports," the officer told Derek with the patience of a saint dealing with an idiot. "That's a criminal offense in Texas, punishable by up to 6 months in jail." Derek's response revealed his complete disconnection from reality. These military families know how to cover up domestic situations. They're trained in deception and psychological warfare. The officer's expression shifted from professional courtesy to barely contained disgust. Nobody likes being lectured about deception by someone who impersonates law enforcement for hobby money. I learned later this officer included Derek's bizarre accusations in his report, creating beautiful documentation of harassment and false reporting. This 9/11 stunt backfired more spectacularly than Derek's career ambitions. Instead of getting our family in trouble, he'd created an official police report documenting his harassment pattern and mental instability. But Derek interpreted the officer's warning as betrayal rather than free legal advice. In his twisted logic, everyone was conspiring against him. Police, hospital security, neighbors who refused to validate his imaginary authority. Probably the mailman, too. Brenda, sensing the legal walls closing in like a perfectly executed pincer movement, tried to distance herself from Derek's escalating insanity. "Maybe tone down the enforcement until things settle down," she suggested during one of their parking lot strategy sessions that my cameras documented in beautiful high-definition detail. Derek heard "tone down" and translated it as "Brenda's abandoning me for those military bullies." Paranoia set in like fog rolling over San Francisco Bay, except fog eventually lifts and Derek's delusions were permanent fixtures. Sarah's daily routine became Derek's unhealthy obsession. Grocery store runs, school pickups, evening walks. Derek shadowed her movements like a predator studying prey patterns. The constant surveillance wore on Sarah's nerves, but she maintained her composure with the kind of grace that makes me proud to call her my wife. I cut my training exercise short and headed home early, officially for family emergency leave. My commanding officer, a fellow father, understood completely. Some situations require immediate tactical response. Derek expected me gone for another week. Instead, he was about to walk into a perfectly prepared ambush that would end his reign of suburban terror permanently. The element of surprise would be decisive. While Sarah filed her police report about the assault, I was in my garage reviewing months of security footage like a detective building a case against the suburban mafia next door. The smell of motor oil and determination filled the air as I discovered something that made Derek's slap look like jaywalking compared to the federal crimes hiding in plain sight. My intelligence training taught me to look for patterns, and Derek's harassment wasn't random stupidity. It was systematic targeting based on demographics that would make civil rights attorneys cancel their vacations and start filing lawsuits immediately. The Chen family harassed about foreign decorations until they removed their beautiful red lanterns that had welcomed neighbors for decades. The Rodriguez family cited for cultural music violations during their daughter's quinceañera celebration. Apparently, mariachi music threatens property values more than Derek's tobacco spitting. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly widow. Derek demanded entry to inspect her deceased husband's workshop for potential safety violations, basically using grief as a weapon. Every minority family, every vulnerable resident, every household that didn't immediately kiss Derek's fake ring of authority, they all got the special harassment treatment. Meanwhile, Brenda's white suburban allies violated the same rules daily without receiving a single citation. Funny how that works in dictatorships, big and small. But the real bombshell exploded when my lawyer subpoenaed HOA financial records during the assault investigation. What we found would make Bernie Madoff send congratulations cards. Brenda had been systematically embezzling community funds for over 2 years with the creativity of a Vegas con artist. Derek's security payments were just appetizers on the corruption buffet. Pool repair fund, diverted to Brenda's personal spa treatments and Botox appointments. Landscaping budget, paid for Brenda's BMW payments and premium gas. Community event funds, bankrolled Brenda's divorce attorney and luxury vacations to Cancun, where she probably practiced her victim routine on beach bartenders. Total theft. Over $60,000 from maintenance funds, emergency reserves, and special assessments that residents paid, thinking they were improving their community. Instead, they were funding Brenda's post-divorce lifestyle while she hired her criminal nephew to terrorize anyone who might audit the books. Sarah, recovering at home with a bruised face that reminded me daily why Derek needed to face consequences, decided to read our entire HOA contract during her sick days. Most people sign these documents without reading the fine print, but Sarah's got that methodical nurse brain that catches details everyone else misses, like when patients aren't telling the truth about their symptoms. Buried in Section 47C, subsection 12, paragraph 4, she found the golden ticket that would destroy their entire operation. All enforcement actions require approval from 60% of community homeowners through written petition or public vote. Brenda's enforcement authority had never been legally valid. Every citation Derek issued, every fine levied, every harassment campaign conducted, all of it based on completely fabricated authority that existed only in Brenda's power-hungry delusions and Derek's tiny brain. Meanwhile, police investigation into Derek's background revealed why he'd failed those psychological evaluations twice. Previous restraining order from an ex-girlfriend citing stalking behavior that sounded eerily familiar. Pattern of workplace violence at 3 different security companies. Apparently, Derek's people skills were consistently problematic across multiple employers. Currently on probation for his second DUI, meaning the assault charge would violate probation terms and send him straight to county jail with a cellmate who probably wouldn't appreciate fake cops. The community awakening happened faster than wildfire through drought conditions. News of the assault spread through neighborhood Facebook groups, and suddenly families were sharing Derek harassment stories they'd kept quiet for months out of fear or embarrassment. Mrs. Patterson revealed Derek had demanded entry to her house for mandatory interior inspections, basically home invasion with a clipboard. The young mother from Maple Street shared video of Derek following her children to school while claiming security escort duties. Even some of Brenda's former allies started admitting Derek's behavior had made them uncomfortable, but they'd been afraid to challenge the HOA president's authority. Brenda's panic was more entertaining than cable television. She realized the assault incident would trigger investigations exposing her entire criminal enterprise. Her first move, throw Derek under the bus harder than a city transit system, claiming he'd exceeded his authority and pretending she'd tried to control his behavior. But Derek, sitting in county jail with plenty of time to think about loyalty versus self-preservation, decided if he was going down for assault, he wasn't going alone for embezzlement. He provided prosecutors with audio recordings of conversations where Brenda specifically instructed him to make the military family understand they're not welcome here, and use whatever pressure necessary to maintain community standards and property values. The sound of Brenda's voice on those recordings, dripping with entitled racism and casual corruption, was music to my ears. The legal dominoes were falling faster than Derek's fake authority, and the symphony was just reaching crescendo. Time to turn my garage into a war room that would make Pentagon planners jealous. I converted our two-car garage into mission headquarters, complete with whiteboards mapping Derek's harassment timeline, Brenda's financial crimes, and every legal violation they'd committed since terrorizing our neighborhood began. The smell of dry erase markers mixed with Sarah's stress-baking cookies drifting from the kitchen, apparently chocolate chip therapy, was her coping mechanism, while I planned their total destruction. Sarah coordinated community outreach from our kitchen table, which had transformed into communications central with laptops, legal documents, and enough coffee cups to caffeinate a small army. The woman who once believed everyone could be reasoned with had evolved into a strategic coordinator who could organize grassroots movements between patient rounds at the hospital. My legal team looked like something from a military thriller. Maria Gonzalez, the attorney who specialized in HOA abuse cases and had a personal vendetta against neighborhood tyrants. My old JAG buddy, Lieutenant Colonel Peterson, now civilian but still carrying that military precision for dismantling bureaucratic corruption. A civil rights lawyer working pro bono because Derek's targeting of minorities had triggered his professional fury, and a constitutional law professor who'd written half the Texas Property Code amendments and was eager to see them applied against obvious criminals. The evidence archive grew like something from a spy movie, months of security camera footage edited into a timeline that documented every harassment incident, every illegal trespass, every violation of civil rights that Derek and Brenda had committed. Financial records showing Brenda's embezzlement patterns with the kind of detail that makes federal prosecutors smile in their sleep. I remember my instructor at intelligence school saying, "Document everything. Criminals always think they're smarter than they actually are, and paper trails don't lie under oath." Brenda and Derek had left enough evidence to convict a small criminal organization, which they basically were. Sarah organized Coffee with Concerned Neighbors meetings that started with 5 people and grew to 47 families demanding HOA reform. She created a WhatsApp group called Oakwood Accountability Network that became the neighborhood's central nervous system for sharing information and coordinating legal responses. The community coalition building reminded me of winning hearts and minds operations overseas, except instead of fighting insurgents, we were battling suburban fascists with fake badges and real embezzlement schemes. Our media strategy developed organically when a local news reporter heard about the military wife assault story. Jennifer Walsh had been covering HOA abuse stories for years, waiting for a case dramatic enough to capture public attention. A fake cop slapping a pediatric nurse while her Navy SEAL husband watched through the kitchen window? That's ratings gold and social justice wrapped in an irresistible package. Social media exploded faster than ordnance in an ammunition depot. # accountable HOAS and # military families matter started trending locally, then spread statewide as other military families shared their own harassment stories. A YouTube channel called HOA Horror Stories featured our situation and gained 50,000 subscribers in 1 week. The legal strategy had multiple fronts like a coordinated military campaign. Criminal charges against Derek for assault, stalking, and impersonating an officer. Civil lawsuit against Derek and the HOA for harassment damages, civil rights violations, and emotional distress. Financial recovery action demanding Brenda pay restitution for embezzled community funds. Constitutional challenge arguing HOA enforcement exceeded legal limits and violated due process rights. My forensic accountant, a former military intelligence analyst who specialized in tracking terrorist financing, traced Brenda's embezzled money like following breadcrumbs to the witch's house. She'd used HOA funds for personal vacations, luxury car payments, and even Derek's gambling debts at the local casino. Total community theft exceeded $75,000 over 3 years of creative bookkeeping. I organized Know Your Rights workshops for homeowners that drew residents from 6 different neighborhoods. Sessions covered HOA legal limits, enforcement procedures, financial oversight requirements, and how to recognize when your community association had become a criminal enterprise masquerading as property management. The attendance numbers told the story. 200+ people showed up because Derek and Brenda's behavior wasn't unique. Across Texas, fake HOA enforcement was becoming an epidemic of petty tyrants with clipboards terrorizing families who just wanted to live peacefully in their own homes. My opposition research revealed connections that would make conspiracy theorists proud. Brenda's real estate license was under review for ethics violations involving fraudulent property disclosures. Derek had been fired from 3 previous security companies for aggressive behavior toward clients. Several HOA board members were preparing to cooperate with investigators in exchange for immunity from fraud charges. The beauty of military planning is that it accounts for multiple contingencies and ensures victory through overwhelming force applied at decisive points. Derek and Brenda had started a fight with superior numbers, better intelligence, legitimate legal authority, and community support that grew stronger every day they continued their criminal behavior. Veterans organizations offered legal support and media amplification. The Texas HOA Reform Coalition adopted our case as their legislative priority for the upcoming session. Military family advocacy groups organized letter-writing campaigns to state representatives about protecting service members from civilian harassment. All the pieces were in position. The battlefield was prepared. The enemy was isolated, demoralized, and facing overwhelming force from multiple directions. Time to execute the final phase and watch these suburban terrorists face the consequences of their actions. Facing criminal charges and a civil lawsuit that would bankrupt her twice over, Brenda transformed from neighborhood dictator into desperate sociopath faster than Derek's fake authority had crumbled under legal scrutiny. Her first brilliant strategy? Hire a private investigator to dig up dirt on my military service, hoping to find evidence of PTSD, combat incidents, or anything that might discredit me in court. The smell of desperation was stronger than the stale cigarettes in whatever bargain basement PI office she'd found in the yellow pages. This investigation backfired spectacularly when my commanding officer learned that a civilian was trying to access classified military records without authorization. Turns out the Defense Department takes a dim view of random people snooping through SEAL operational histories, especially when those people are under federal investigation for embezzlement and conspiracy. But Brenda wasn't finished embarrassing herself. She created fake social media accounts to spread rumors about our family, claiming Jake was using military status for special treatment, and suggesting Sarah had provoked the assault through aggressive behavior toward community volunteers. The irony was beautiful. A woman who'd stolen $75,000 from her neighbors was lecturing people about ethics and community values. It's like getting marriage advice from someone on their fourth divorce, except with more criminal liability. From county jail, Derek gave interviews to anyone with a microphone, claiming self-defense and portraying the assault as a reasonable response to military intimidation. His lawyer pushed the narrative that Derek was just a community volunteer trying to help, who felt threatened by a trained killer with anger management issues. The character assassination campaign escalated when anonymous flyers appeared throughout our neighborhood, claiming I had combat PTSD and was dangerous to community safety. These flyers included fake quotes from unnamed military sources expressing concern about veterans with unresolved trauma living near families with children. Sarah found me in the garage one evening staring at one of these flyers with the kind of cold fury that used to precede very bad days for very bad people in distant countries. But instead of losing control, I did something that terrified Brenda more than any display of anger could have. I documented everything methodically and added it to our evidence file. My wife put her hand on my shoulder and said something that reminded me why I married the smartest woman in Texas. They're not attacking you because you're dangerous, Jake. They're attacking you because they're scared, and scared people make stupid mistakes. The smear campaign expanded when Brenda's real estate connections started spreading rumors to potential home buyers, claiming our street was unstable due to military family controversy, and suggesting property values were declining because of ongoing legal disputes with aggressive residents. But here's where Brenda's desperation revealed her complete stupidity. Every fake social media post, every anonymous flyer, every whispered rumor could be traced back to her through digital forensics and witness testimony. She was building our defamation case while destroying her own credibility. Sarah became the target of increasingly personal attacks. Anonymous calls to the children's hospital questioning her emotional stability and fitness to work with vulnerable children. Fake online reviews claiming she'd been unprofessional and aggressive toward patients' families. Social media posts suggesting she was manipulating military hero status for sympathy and special treatment. The hospital administration's response was swift and decisive. They increased security, reported the harassment to police, and issued a public statement supporting their exemplary pediatric nurse whose dedication to children's health care is beyond question. Turns out attacking someone beloved by parents whose children she'd helped save was another strategic blunder in Brenda's campaign of self-destruction. Meanwhile, Derek's desperation reached new heights of pathetic. He attempted contact through third parties, using his girlfriend to drive past our house and take photos for documentation purposes. When that resulted in additional stalking charges, he tried discussing the case on social media, despite explicit court orders prohibiting contact. Each violation resulted in increased bail restrictions and longer potential sentences. Derek was literally extending his own prison time through the kind of impulse control problems that had gotten him rejected from police academy in the first place. The legal maneuvering revealed coordinated defense strategies that suggested ongoing conspiracy. Derek's attorney and Brenda's lawyer were sharing information, coordinating motions, and presenting unified defenses that indicated continued criminal collaboration even while facing separate charges. My favorite moment came when defense attorneys filed motions claiming my military training made me an unreliable witness, whose combat experience affects objective judgment. And they requested psychological evaluations, attempted to exclude security camera evidence as privacy invasion, and pushed for case dismissal based on mutual combat theory. The judge's response was poetry in legal form. Mr. Steele's military service record shows exemplary conduct and heroic service to our nation. The defendant's criminal records show assault, fraud, and harassment of military families. This court will not entertain arguments that service to country disqualifies someone from receiving equal protection under the law. That ruling made local news and went viral among military families nationwide. Suddenly, our neighborhood dispute became a national symbol of military family rights and civilian accountability. But Brenda and Derek weren't finished destroying themselves. Their final desperate moves were about to provide the perfect setup for public vindication that would be remembered long after they were forgotten in prison cells where they belonged. Facing inevitable criminal conviction and financial ruin, Brenda decided to deploy her nuclear option, throwing Derek under the bus so hard he'd need a new zip code. Her new strategy involved fabricating documentation showing she'd tried to fire Derek months earlier, complete with backdated letters claiming he'd exceeded his authority and ignored direct supervisory instructions. The smell of desperation mixed with printer toner as she worked overtime creating fake paper trails that wouldn't fool a kindergarten teacher, let alone federal investigators. But Brenda's masterpiece of stupidity was staging a break-in at her own house, complete with threatening notes referencing military combat tactics and advanced warfare training. She filed police reports alleging that my military friends were intimidating her family through psychological warfare techniques learned overseas. The performance was Oscar-worthy in its incompetence. Brenda claimed intruders had ransacked her house while leaving expensive jewelry untouched, stolen important documents while ignoring cash, and left threatening notes written in block letters that looked suspiciously like her own handwriting samples from HOA meeting minutes. Police investigation took approximately 48 hours to expose this charade completely. Security footage from neighboring houses showed no intruders, only Brenda moving her own belongings around and creating artificial evidence of forced entry. The threatening notes were written on paper matching her home printer, using ink that matched pens found in her kitchen drawer. Detective Morrison, the lead investigator, told me later that Brenda's fake break-in was the most obviously staged crime scene I've encountered in 20 years of police work, including cases where teenagers tried to fake their own kidnappings to avoid final exams. This false flag operation triggered additional charges: filing false police reports, insurance fraud, obstruction of justice, and evidence tampering. Brenda had literally arrested herself through incompetent criminal behavior that would be comedy gold if it wasn't so pathetically desperate. Derek's response from his jail cell was swift and brutal. Realizing Brenda was abandoning him to save her own skin, he released audio recordings that destroyed any remaining credibility she might have possessed. The recordings were devastating. Brenda's voice, clear as crystal, instructing Derek to make the military family understand they're not welcome in our community, and use whatever methods necessary to maintain property values and neighborhood standards. Her casual use of racial slurs when discussing minority families would make federal hate crime prosecutors salivate. But the most damning recording captured Brenda explaining her embezzlement scheme with the pride of someone describing a favorite recipe. These people are too stupid to audit the books properly, so we just move money around and call it different things. They pay their dues like good little sheep while we maintain real control over community decisions. Derek had been recording their conversations for months, originally as insurance against potential legal problems. Instead, he documented a comprehensive criminal conspiracy that would send Brenda to federal prison for years instead of months. The community's reaction was swift and merciless. Even Brenda's most loyal supporters abandoned her faster than passengers leaving a sinking ship. Nancy, her former best friend, publicly apologized for supporting criminal behavior disguised as community leadership. Bob resigned as treasurer and cooperated fully with investigators to avoid prosecution for unknowingly facilitating embezzlement. Sarah, meanwhile, had evolved from victim into community organizer with the efficiency of someone who'd found her true calling. She organized emergency HOA meetings that drew attendance numbers not seen since the neighborhood Christmas parties, except these gatherings focused on criminal accountability instead of holiday cheer. The petition demanding Brenda's immediate resignation collected signatures from 89% of neighborhood residents within 72 hours. The remaining 11% included 3 families who were traveling and 2 houses that were currently vacant due to owner relocations. But Brenda's desperation reached new heights of criminal stupidity when she attempted to flee the state with suitcases full of cash and falsified documents. Airport security found her at Dallas-Fort Worth International with $47,000 in cash, fake identification documents, and travel itineraries to non-extradition countries. The arrest at the airport was captured by news crews who'd been monitoring the case, creating viral video footage of Brenda being handcuffed while screaming about military conspiracies and harassment by government agents. Her meltdown became internet famous under hashtags like #HOA and #FakeBreakAndFail. Additional charges included money laundering, flight risk violations, and possession of fraudulent identification. Bail was revoked completely, landing Brenda in the same county jail as Derek, where they could enjoy each other's company while awaiting federal prosecution. The irony was perfect. 2 criminals who'd terrorized their community through fake authority now faced real authority in the form of federal judges, FBI investigations, and prison sentences that would last longer than most people's mortgages. Sarah was elected temporary HOA president by unanimous vote from families who'd witnessed her transformation from harassment victim into community leader. Her first official actions included eliminating private security, refunding illegitimate fines, and implementing financial transparency requirements that would prevent future embezzlement schemes. Derek and Brenda had started this fight to intimidate one military family into submission. Instead, they'd united an entire community around justice, accountability, and the principle that criminals with clipboards are still criminals. Their reign of suburban terror was over, but the consequences of their actions were just beginning. The monthly county commissioners' meeting became the stage for Derek and Brenda's final public humiliation, complete with live television coverage and an audience that looked like a military family rally mixed with a neighborhood watch convention. The auditorium buzzed with the energy of 300-plus residents, veterans groups wearing Support Military Families t-shirts, and local media crews setting up equipment like they were covering a presidential debate. The smell of fresh coffee from the lobby mixed with anticipation, as people who'd followed our story for months finally got to witness justice in real time. Commissioner Martinez called me as the primary witness for HOA reform discussion, and I walked to the podium with the measured confidence that comes from having overwhelming evidence and righteous fury perfectly controlled. The clicking of cameras sounded like distant gunfire as I began testimony that would be replayed on news channels statewide. Commissioners, we moved to Oakwood Estates seeking community. Instead, we found predators wearing badges of fake authority who used harassment, embezzlement, and assault to terrorize families into submission. The large screen behind me displayed Derek's assault video in crystal-clear detail, followed by financial documents showing Brenda's systematic theft of community funds. Every fake citation, every illegal payment, every violation of civil rights was documented with the precision of a military intelligence briefing. This criminal conspiracy stole over $75,000 from hardworking families while targeting minorities and military personnel for special harassment. They didn't just break laws, they broke trust, safety, and the basic social contract that makes communities possible. Sarah's testimony provided the emotional impact that legal documents couldn't capture. She showed photos of her facial bruising, described children afraid to play outside because of Derek's stalking, and explained how systematic harassment had traumatized families who just wanted to live peacefully in their own neighborhood. No family should endure assault for displaying an American flag in their yard. No community should tolerate criminals disguised as authority figures. And no military spouse should fear for her children's safety while her husband serves our country overseas. The parade of community witnesses was devastating. Mrs. Chen, her voice shaking with age and determination, described Derek, demanding removal of cultural decorations that had welcomed neighbors for decades. The Rodriguez family explained how their children stopped playing traditional music to avoid Derek's harassment. Mrs. Patterson revealed Derek's midnight trespassing and demands to enter her home for mandatory inspections. Derek's appearance was the pathetic climax everyone had anticipated. Brought from jail in orange jumpsuit and shackles, he mumbled a court-ordered apology that sounded like someone reading a grocery list under threat of additional charges. "I apologize for my actions and recognize they were inappropriate and illegal," Derek recited without emotion or sincerity, his eyes focused on the floor like a scolded child who'd been caught stealing cookies. When Commissioner Rodriguez asked if he wanted to explain his behavior, Derek's response revealed the delusional thinking that had driven months of harassment. "I felt threatened by military training and thought I was protecting the community from dangerous people." The audience reaction was immediate and brutal. Disgusted murmurs rippled through the crowd as people realized Derek still believed military families were threats, requiring his protection rather than heroes deserving community support. Brenda's absence spoke volumes about her cowardice. Federal custody prevented her appearance, but her attorney read a prepared statement blaming Derek for exceeding authority and claiming financial irregularities were bookkeeping errors committed by volunteer staff with inadequate training. The community's response was swift and merciless. Audible boos filled the auditorium as people who'd lived with months of harassment heard Brenda's final attempt to avoid responsibility for criminal behavior that had destroyed neighborhood peace and safety. Commissioner Martinez asked for my reform recommendations, and I produced the 47-page report that Sarah and I had prepared with military precision and community input. Every family deserves safety in their own community. That's what we fought to defend overseas, and that's what we demand here at home. The mic drop moment came when I detailed specific legislative reforms: mandatory licensing for HOA enforcement personnel, financial oversight requirements preventing embezzlement, and enhanced penalties for harassment of military families. This report becomes our template for county HOA oversight ordinance that will protect future families from experiencing the terrorism we endured. Sheriff's Commander Williams provided official vindication by publicly apologizing for initial dismissive responses to harassment complaints and announcing new protocols for investigating fake security operations. We failed this military family initially, but we've learned from that failure. No future family will endure months of stalking and harassment before law enforcement takes appropriate action. The legal victory was comprehensive and final. Civil lawsuit settled for $175,000 in damages plus attorney fees, with Brenda's house sold to pay restitution and Derek's wages garnished for the next decade. Local TV interviews outside the courthouse captured our message to military families nationwide. We serve our country. We shouldn't have to fight wars in our own neighborhoods too. The story went national within hours, picked up by CNN, Fox News, Military Times, and Veterans Today. Our neighborhood dispute had become a symbol of military family rights and civilian accountability that would inspire legislation in 12 states. Derek and Brenda had intended to intimidate one family into submission. Instead, they'd created a national movement for military family protection and HOA reform that would outlast their prison sentences by decades. Sometimes justice isn't just served, it's delivered with overwhelming force by people who refuse to be victims. 6 months later, Derek completed his 18-month jail sentence and stumbled back into a world that had moved on without him. Prohibited from any security work and struggling with minimum wage jobs, he lived with his mother in a trailer park 30 miles from our neighborhood, close enough to remember his failures, far enough to never threaten anyone again. His probation officer reported that Derek spent most visits complaining about military families destroying honest people's lives, apparently still convinced he was the victim in a story where he'd assaulted a pediatric nurse for carrying groceries. Some people never learn, which is why restraining orders exist permanently. Brenda's federal conviction resulted in 4 years in minimum security prison, $200,000 restitution, and 10 years probation that would monitor every financial transaction she made until 2035. Her real estate empire collapsed faster than her credibility, with personal bankruptcy following criminal conviction, like thunder follows lightning. She spent her prison time in the laundry facility, washing clothes and probably dreaming about the community funds she'd stolen to maintain her lifestyle. Early release was unlikely since she'd made zero progress on restitution payments. Turns out federal judges don't accept bookkeeping errors as explanations for systematic embezzlement. Oakwood Estates transformed under Sarah's leadership into the community we'd originally hoped to find. Property values increased 18% due to positive media attention and reformed governance that attracted military families seeking veteran-friendly neighborhoods. Our HOA became the state model for transparent financial management and resident-focused policies. The Military Family Resilience Scholarship was established using recovered embezzlement funds plus community donations, supporting children who'd experienced harassment trauma. Emma and Marcus were the first recipients, earning academic recognition despite months of psychological warfare from adults who should have protected neighborhood children instead of terrorizing them. Sarah completed paralegal certification and became Texas's leading advocate for HOA reform, traveling to speak at military bases about civilian harassment and legal remedies. Her expertise helped dozens of military families fight similar battles, turning our nightmare into a resource for protecting other service members. The ripple effects exceeded our wildest expectations. The Texas Military Family Protection Act passed with bipartisan support, requiring background checks for HOA enforcement personnel and enhanced penalties for discriminatory harassment. 12 other states introduced similar legislation, citing our case as inspiration for protecting military families from civilian abuse. I transitioned to civilian career in veteran family advocacy, consulting for military families facing harassment and developing training materials for base legal assistance offices. My experience fighting suburban terrorists translated surprisingly well to helping other families navigate bureaucratic corruption and fake authority figures. Our annual Community Unity Festival replaced the old divisive HOA meetings with celebration of diversity, veteran appreciation, and children's activities. The event raised funds for military family support services, while Derek's old patrol route became a family 5K fun run that attracted participants from 6 neighboring communities. The festival's highlight was always the American flag ceremony, where I reinstalled the original flag that had triggered this entire conflict. Children who'd once hidden from Derek's harassment now played freely while their parents watched military families receive the community respect we'd fought to establish. Statistical proof of our success was overwhelming. 0 harassment complaints filed since reform implementation, 95% resident satisfaction with transparent HOA leadership, and 300% increase in military family applications for our neighborhood. Urban planning students studied our governance model for thesis research on community accountability. Mrs. Chen's garden bloomed with cultural decorations that welcomed visitors instead of triggering citations. The Rodriguez family hosted monthly cultural appreciation events featuring traditional music that enhanced community life rather than violating imaginary noise ordinances. Mrs. Patterson's grandchildren visited regularly, playing in the yard where Derek once prowled with flashlights and fake authority. Derek and Brenda had intended to create a community where they held absolute power over neighbors too intimidated to resist. Instead, they created a neighborhood where accountability, diversity, and military family support became foundational principles that attracted national recognition. Sarah's final interview with Military Spouse magazine captured our journey perfectly. Evil succeeds when good people stay silent. We chose to document, organize, and fight back through legal channels. Our victory belongs to every military family facing civilian harassment. My advice to other military families: document everything, know your rights, build community coalitions, and never surrender to bullies with clipboards. Justice delayed isn't justice denied if you're persistent enough to outlast criminals. Share your HOA nightmare story in the comments below. You're not alone, and together we can hold these suburban terrorists accountable. Subscribe for more military family victory stories and visit militaryhoarights.org for legal resources that turn victims into victors. Next week, Navy intelligence officer discovers HOA president's husband stealing mail. He's about to learn why you don't mess with someone trained in counterintelligence. The sound of children laughing where Derek's truck once intimidated families, the smell of community barbecues replacing corruption's stench, and the sight of American flags flying proudly throughout a neighborhood that learned to fight for the values they represent. Sometimes the good guys win, sometimes justice gets served with overwhelming force, and sometimes suburban terrorists learn that military families don't retreat. We regroup, we plan, and we execute victory with precision that leaves enemies wondering how they ever thought they could win.